Hey guys, tonight we are travelling back to the stifling heat of the 18th century Caribbean. You're standing on the polished deck of a Spanish galleon, a gentle rocking beneath your feet. The air is so humid you can almost drink it, and it smells of tar, salt, and a staggering amount of wealth. Before you, a fleet of ships strains at its anchors, their holds so laden with gold, silver, and royal jewels that they sit low and heavy in the water. This isn't some thrilling pirate fantasy. This is a high-stakes, high-pressure job where a single mistake, or just a little bad luck, could cost you everything. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always a quiet pleasure to see who's tuning in, so feel free to post your location and what time it is for you in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1715. You are Don Juan Esteban de Ubila, and the title that rests upon your shoulders, Captain General of the Tierra Firme Fleet, feels heavier than the humid July air of Havana. From your vantage point on the stern castle of your flagship, the Nuestra Señora de la Regla, the harbour is a tapestry of controlled chaos. The deep turquoise water is crowded with the 12 ships under your command. They are not merely ships. They are floating vaults, the culmination of years of toil and treasure gathering from across the vast Spanish Empire. For months, you have been anchored here in this sweltering, vital port. The waiting has been its own special kind of torment. Every week, another fast dispatch ship arrives from Spain, carrying letters from the court of King Philip V. His Majesty's stationery is always exquisite, his seal impeccable, but the message is always the same. Hurry. The crown is impatient, and you can hardly blame him. The long and grinding war of the Spanish succession had bled the royal coffers dry. Spain needs this treasure not for luxuries but for survival, to pay soldiers to rebuild its navy, to simply keep the machinery of an empire from grinding to a halt. The king's letters have the delicately veiled threat of a modern corporate memo asking for an overdue report. You know what is at stake: your career, your name, and the financial future of a nation. You run a hand over the smooth, sun-warmed wood of the railing. Below, on the docks, the last of the provisions are being loaded. Shouts in Andalusian, Basque, and Galician dialects echo across the water as shirtless men roll massive barrels of fresh water and wine up the gangplanks. Looking at the provisions manifest, you allow yourself a small, grim smile. The ship's biscuit, the infamous hardtack, is listed in quantities that could probably build a small fortress. Sailors joke that the only way to eat it is to soak it in wine for an hour, and even then, you're just eating wine-flavoured wood. It's not a joke you find particularly funny anymore. The sheer scale of the cargo is difficult to comprehend. 2 great treasure fleets, the Tierra Firme Squadron from Cartagena and Portobello, and the Nueva España fleet from Veracruz have converged here. Your command represents the combined wealth of half the world. There are millions of silver pesos struck from the seemingly inexhaustible mines of Potosí. So many 8 real coins that thousands of them are simply packed loose in chests like gravel. Gold doubloons and ingots from the Viceroyalty of Peru catch the light whenever a crate is opened for inspection, a sight so common it has become almost mundane. Then there are the personal fortunes, chests of emeralds from the Muzo mines in modern-day Colombia, luminous pearls from the waters off Venezuela, and exotic goods from the other side of the world brought by the Manila galleons across the Pacific to be carted over Mexico. Spices, silks, and perhaps most valuable of all to the new queen, Elisabetta Farnese, a stunning collection of Chinese porcelain, so delicate it seems impossible it could survive the journey. All of this wealth is the reason for the delay. Historians still argue whether the fleet was held up for so long in Havana, primarily by political maneuvering back in Spain, by a simple, greedy desire to wait for one last mule train of silver from the mines, or by the soul-crushing logistical inertia that is the hallmark of any grand bureaucracy. Whatever the reason, you should have sailed in the spring, well before the dreaded temporales, the season of hurricanes. But here you are, at the end of July. Every local sailor, every grizzled harbour pilot has told you the same thing. This is a foolish time to sail north. The air gets heavy, the sea gets quiet, and the sky turns a strange, unsettling shade of yellow before the world comes apart. You've listened to their warnings, and they echo your own deep misgivings. Yet the king's orders are absolute. The pressure outweighs the prudence, and so you've spent the past weeks in a frenzy of preparation. You've personally overseen the careening of the ships, their hulls tipped on their sides on the beach so that barnacles and shipworms could be scraped away and the seams sealed with fresh tar and hemp. You've watched the riggers climb the towering masts like spiders, checking every rope, every stay, every sail. The well-being of over 2,500 souls, sailors, soldiers, merchants and their families, rests on the integrity of that rope and wood. In the quiet of your cabin at night, surrounded by maps and manifests, you found evidence of other, more secretive cargoes. A junior officer was caught attempting to smuggle aboard a small collection of forbidden books, writings by Enlightenment thinkers that the Spanish Inquisition would gleefully burn, along with the man who possessed them. You had the books quietly disposed of and the officer confined to his quarters. It's another small weight on your conscience. Not just gold and silver, but dangerous ideas are trying to make the crossing too. Now, the final decision has been made. The last of the paperwork has been signed, your quill scratching your signature onto the final departure order. The ink sits, dark and final, on the parchment. A flotilla of small boats carries the last of the wealthy passengers from the shore. They are dressed in their finest silks and velvets, wholly unsuited for the oppressive heat, fanning themselves as they are rowed toward their new homes on the galleons. You give the signal. A cannon fires a single blank charge, a sharp crack that cuts through the humid air. It's the order to weigh anchor. Slowly, deliberately, the sounds of the harbour change. The rhythmic chanting of sailors at the capstans begins. A low, effortful song as they heave on the heavy wooden bars, coaxing the massive anchors from the muddy sea floor. On ship after ship, sails that have been furled for months are unfurled, their white canvas catching the light breeze and blossoming against the bright blue sky. Your flagship, the Regla, begins to turn, her bow pointing toward the narrow channel that leads to the open sea. It is a slow, ponderous movement, like a great beast waking from a long slumber. You feel a strange sense of calm settle over you, the quiet that comes after making an irreversible decision. It's like the feeling of finally sending a deeply stressful message and immediately accepting that you can't unsend it. The waiting is over. For better or for worse, you are finally on your way. You watch the stone ramparts of the Morro Castle slip by, the last bastion of safety before you enter the unpredictable embrace of the Florida Straits. The open sea awaits. You are 2 days out from Havana, and the initial relief of being underway has softened into the gentle, predictable rhythm of a sea voyage. The great lumbering galleons, so ungainly in the crowded harbour, have found their grace. They move together, a loose constellation of wood and canvas against the immense blue of the water and sky. The mood aboard the Nuestra Señora de la Regla is almost placid, lulled by the familiar routines of the open ocean. The day begins before the sun rises with the changing of the watch. The gentle creak of the ship's timbers is the constant underlying music of your life now. It's a sound you've come to understand, interpreting its groans and sighs as you would the breathing of a living creature. A sharp crack might signal a timber stressed by the strain of the masts, while a rhythmic squeak might just be a loose plank on the gun deck. The air carries the scent of salt, cooking garlic from the galley, and the faint, pervasive odour of unwashed humanity that is inescapable on any vessel of this era. It's a smell you stopped noticing years ago. You take your morning meal in your great cabin, which, though spacious by shipboard standards, still feels confining after months on land. The mullioned windows at the stern offer a sweeping view of the fleet trailing behind you. They are a reassuring sight. Your frigate, the Orca de Lima, is visible off your port quarter, her lighter build allowing her to sail a bit more nimbly. Further back, you can just make out the top sails of the Nuestra Señora de las Nieves. Watching them, you are acutely aware that you are the brain of this massive seaborne organism. Your commands, relayed by signal flags, coordinate its every move. After your meal, a surprisingly decent portion of salted fish, some onions and a biscuit that you actually manage to break without assistance from a hammer, you begin your daily inspection. You walk the decks, your polished leather boots making soft thuds on the holy stone planks. Sailors pause in their work, touching their foreheads in a gesture of respect as you pass. They are busy with their endless tasks, splicing ropes, patching sails, checking the lashings on the cannons. The soldiers of the marine contingent polish their muskets and pikes, their metalwork glinting in the morning sun. A good voyage is a busy voyage. Idle hands lead to mischief, a truism of the sea as old as sailing itself. You offer a quiet word of encouragement to a young caulker's mate retarring a seam, his face and hands stained black with his trade. He nods, too shy to speak, but you see a flicker of pride in his eyes. The weather has been your ally so far. Favourable winds from the southeast fill your sails, pushing the fleet steadily northward along the coast of Florida. You plot your course meticulously on the vellum charts spread across the great table in your cabin. The route is a well-worn path, north through the narrow funnel of the Florida Straits, then catching the powerful current of the Gulf Stream to carry you up the American coast before turning east towards Spain. It's the maritime equivalent of a superhighway. A fascinating, if somewhat quirky tidbit you picked up from a naval engineer is that some shipwrights had begun experimenting with building vessels with slightly asymmetrical hulls, believing it helped them better counteract the persistent push of currents like the Gulf Stream. It's a fringe theory, but one you find yourself pondering as you watch the water slide past. The passengers have found their sea legs and are beginning to emerge from their cabins. Wealthy merchants and colonial officials promenade on the poop deck. Their fine clothes a stark contrast to the practicality of the sailor's garb. Their wives and daughters stay in small, chattering groups, finding shade under an improvised awning. One of them holds a small, ugly dog that yaps incessantly, a sound that grates on your nerves more than any groaning timber. A few priests walk the deck, reading their breviaries, their lips moving in silent prayer. Their presence is meant to be a comfort, but it serves as another reminder of the voyage's gravity. Even God, it seems, has to be officially brought along for the ride. By the 5th day at sea, July 29th, a subtle change begins to make itself felt. It is nothing you can point to on a chart, nothing a land dweller would ever notice. But for a man like you, whose life has been spent reading the language of the sea, the signs are there. The gentle swells that have been rocking you to sleep have become longer, deeper, with a strange and oily smoothness. They seem to emanate from a source far beyond the horizon, an unheard, unfelt disturbance sending its messengers ahead. The normal, cheerful azure of the sky has taken on a slightly milky, hazy quality, and the sun shines through it with a pale, brassy light. The air itself feels different. The usual brisk trade winds have become fitful, and then have died away almost completely. The great sails, which had been so full and round, now slacken and pop with the listless rocking of the ship. An unnatural calm descends. The stillness is more unsettling than any storm. The sounds of the ship become clearer, sharper. The snap of a flag, the chatter of the passengers, the cry of a lone gull that circles high overhead, its call seeming to hang in the motionless air. You confer with your sailing master, a weathered man from Cadiz with skin like tanned leather and eyes that have seen 1,000 horizons. He stands beside you, sniffing the air as an animal would. "No huele bien, Capitan," he says quietly. "It doesn't smell right." You know what he means. The clean, salty scent of the sea is gone, replaced by something heavier, almost oppressive. Historians would later note that 1715 was a particularly active year for hurricanes, part of a cycle of intense tropical activity in the Atlantic. Your fleet, delayed for months, had managed to set sail directly into the path of what modern meteorologists would classify as a major hurricane, likely a category 4 or 5. You, of course, have no such classifications. You only have the signs, the deep swells, the strange sky, the unnerving calm. It's the ancient, ominous prologue to a tragedy written by the wind and water. That evening, as the sun sets, the sky puts on a display of terrifying beauty. The western horizon ignites in lurid shades of red, orange, and a strange, sickly green that you have never seen before. The clouds are high and thin, like wisps of blood-tinged smoke. There is no peaceful twilight. The light simply drains from the sky, and an unnervingly hot, damp darkness falls, thick and suffocating. The mood on the ship has soured. The easy chatter of the past few days has been replaced by anxious whispers. The sailors move about their duties with a quiet, grim purposefulness, securing anything that could come loose, double-checking the hatches. They know, as you do, what this celestial spectacle portends. You give the order to shorten sail, reducing the canvas to the sturdiest, smallest storm sails. There is little else you can do but wait. You stand on the deck for a long time, watching the fleet behind you. The lanterns on the other ships are faint points of light, rising and falling on the heaving dark sea. They seem impossibly small and fragile, and you feel a profound sense of isolation. You are the Captain General, the one in command. But tonight, you are utterly at the mercy of forces far beyond your control. The quiet has become a palpable presence, a tightening knot of dread in the pit of your stomach. The end of the calm comes just after midnight. It isn't a gradual transition, but a sudden, violent assault. A low moan begins on the horizon, a sound that grows with astonishing speed into a deafening shriek. The first gust of wind hits the Nuestra Señora de la Regla like a solid object. The ship, which has been lolling placidly on the swells, lurches violently, and the towering mainmast lets out a groan of protest so profound it sounds like the cry of a dying beast. You are in your cabin, having tried and failed to find a moment of rest, when the impact throws you against the far bulkhead. Your charts, quills and dividers slide from the table and clatter to the deck in a chaotic heap. The storm is upon you. You stumble out onto the quarterdeck, gripping a railing to keep your footing as the ship heels over. The world has been transformed into a maelstrom of roaring wind and flying water. Rain doesn't fall. It drives horizontally, thick and stinging, each drop feeling like a small pebble flung against your skin. The air is so full of sea spray that you cannot distinguish where the sea ends and the sky begins. It is one and the same, a churning, shrieking chaos of white and black. Visibility is reduced to a few yards, and the lanterns that once marked the positions of the other ships in your fleet are gone, swallowed by the maelstrom as if they never existed. You are utterly, terrifyingly alone. This is not a battle. A battle implies an enemy you can fight, a strategy you can employ. This is an unmaking. The hurricane is not a thing to be fought, but a condition to be endured. There are no orders you can give that can change the fundamental reality of your situation. The sailing master stands near the helm, his face illuminated in brief, ghostly flashes of lightning. He and two other sailors, their muscles bulging with strain, are fighting the great wheel, trying to keep the ship's bow pointed into the wind. It is a desperate, draining task. The force of the wind and waves threatens to wrench the rudder from their control, which would leave the ship to broach, to turn broadside to the waves, a death sentence for any vessel. The sound is overwhelming, a physical pressure on your eardrums. It is a symphony of destruction. The high-pitched scream of the wind through the rigging, the deeper, resonant booming of waves crashing against the hull, the sharp crack of snapping ropes and splitting wood, and beneath it all, the constant, horrifying roar of the tempest. You have to shout directly into a man's ear for him to hear you, and even then, the words are torn away by the gale. The motion of the ship is unlike anything you have ever experienced. It is not the rhythmic rise and fall of a normal storm. The Regla is being lifted to incredible heights on the crests of monstrous waves, hanging there for a terrifying moment in the wind-scoured darkness before plunging down into the trough with a gut-wrenching drop that threatens to tear the masts from their foundations. The deck is constantly awash, green water cascading over the rails, carrying away anything not securely lashed down. A spare yardarm breaks free of its restraints and skids across the deck like a battering ram before being swept overboard. Below decks, the scene is one of disciplined terror. Soldiers and sailors work in the flickering, unsteady light of swaying lanterns shoring up the cargo. The immense weight of the treasure, which made the ships so stable in calm weather, is now a liability. The shifting chests of silver and gold act like giant internal hammers, pounding against the ship's frames. If they break free, they will splinter the hull from the inside out. Remember that finely packed porcelain for the Queen? You can almost hear the priceless crates, being reduced to a fine, sandy dust with every sickening lurch of the ship. Water begins to find its way in, pouring through strained seams and damaged hatch covers. The ceaseless, monotonous work of the pumps begins, a grim, rhythmic clanking that will be the heartbeat of the ship for as long as it survives. Men work in waist-deep, sloshing water. their faces set in grim masks of exhaustion. Historians still argue whether Ubilla and his captains made critical navigational errors in the hours leading up to the storm, hugging the Florida coast too closely and leaving themselves no room to maneuver out to the open sea, or perhaps it was simply an impossible situation where no amount of seamanship could have saved them from a storm of such magnitude. From your perspective, clinging to the deck of your flagship, such academic debates are meaningless. All that matters is the next wave, the next gust of wind. Hours pass in this state of brutal sensory overload. You lose all track of time. Is it still the same night? Has a new day dawned? It's impossible to tell. The sky remains a uniform, tumultuous grey-black. You see things in the fleeting light of the lightning that your mind can barely process. The fore-topmast of your ship, with its sail already torn to shreds, splinters and cracks. It hangs for a moment, a wounded limb, before it falls with a horrific crash, bringing a tangled web of ropes and rigging down with it. A cry of pain is swallowed by the storm. At some point, in a momentary lull between waves, you think you see another ship. It's a dark, spectral shape, impossibly close, lifted high on a wave. It might be the Nuestra Senora del Carmen, but you can't be sure. The ship is in dire trouble, dismasted and rolling uncontrollably in the troughs of the waves. It's a ghost ship, a premonition of your own fate. And then it's gone, plunging into a chasm between the waves and vanishing from sight forever. The ordeal frays the mind as much as the body. The constant noise, the violent motion, the bone-deep cold and the ever-present fear create a state of surreal exhaustion. One of your officers, a young nobleman from a good family, begins to laugh, a high, unhinged sound that is somehow more terrifying than the storm itself. You grab him by the collar of his coat, shake him hard, and shout his name until his eyes find a sliver of focus. This is a very real danger that men will simply break, surrendering to the madness of the moment. You think of that officer caught with the forbidden Enlightenment books. His philosophical treatises would offer little comfort now. This is a moment for primal survival, not nuanced debate. And then comes the sound you have been dreading. It is not loud, not compared to the shriek of the wind, but it is more terrible. It is a deep, grating, grinding sound that you feel through the soles of your boots. The reef. You have been driven west, pushed relentlessly by the wind and current, and now the bottom of the hull is scraping against the unseen coral heads of the Florida coast. The grinding is followed by a series of shuddering impacts, each one a mortal wound to your ship. Timbers, stressed for hours, finally give way. A great seam splits open below the waterline, and the sea begins to pour in, not as a leak to be pumped, but as a flood to be drowned in. The end comes quickly. The ship is dying. The rhythmic clank of the pumps falters and stops. The great galleon, your pride, the symbol of your authority, settles, its buoyant life draining away. It lists hard to port, the deck tilting to a horrifying angle. The remaining masts surrender, falling like great trees. There is no longer a ship, only a disintegrating collection of wood and rope, being battered to pieces by the surf. Your last clear thought before the waves sweeps you from the wreckages of the king. You did not fail his orders, you had sailed, and in doing so you have sailed directly into the gaping mouth of hell. You do not remember the ship breaking apart. You recall a final bone-jarring impact, the roar of water, and then nothing. Your return to consciousness is slow and agonizing, a piecemeal assembly of senses. The first thing you register is the taste of salt and sand in your mouth. Then comes the sound, not the apocalyptic shriek of the hurricane, but a relentless rhythmic roar of surf pounding onto a beach. You open your eyes. The world is a smear of grey, the sky and the sea still churned into a single, furious colour. You are lying half in the water, the receding tide tugging weakly at your legs. You manage to push yourself up onto your elbows, the simple movement sending a constellation of pain through your battered body. You are on a sandy shore, a desolate stretch of coastline littered with the pathetic remnants of your fleet. As far as you can see in either direction, the beach is a graveyard of splintered timbers, shattered masts and tangled rigging. The storm is still blowing, though its cyclonic fury has passed, leaving a blustering, rain-swept gale in its wake. Slowly, painfully, you get to your feet. You are soaked to the bone, shivering uncontrollably, but adrenaline and the primal instinct to survive push you forward. You stagger along the beach, your steps unsteady in the soft sand. You are not alone. Other figures are moving through the debris, dazed and ghostly. They are the flotsam of your grand expedition, sailors, soldiers, a few passengers. Some are simply sitting in the sand, staring blankly out at the churning sea that has just tried to kill them. Others are searching, calling out the names of friends and shipmates, their voices thin against the roar of the wind. The scale of the devastation is absolute. Just offshore, the skeletal remains of several ships are impaled on the reef, being systematically torn apart by the crashing waves. You recognize the high stern castle of what might be the Nuestra Señora de las Nieves, tilted at a drunken angle. Further down the coast, another hull is completely upside down, its keel exposed to the sky like the belly of a dead whale. Of your own magnificent flagship, the Regla, there is no sign at all. She has been utterly obliterated, her timbers and treasure scattered along miles of coastline. You find your sailing master, the weathered man from Cadiz. He has a nasty gash on his forehead, but he is alive. He simply nods at you, his face a mask of exhausted grief. There is nothing to say. You were the Captain General. He was the sailing master. Together you were stewards of this floating world, and now it lies in ruins at your feet. The usual maritime hierarchy has dissolved, replaced by a more fundamental one: the living and the dead. Over the next few hours, the small, scattered groups of survivors begin to coalesce. You gather them together, a huddle of perhaps a few hundred souls out of the 2,500 who sailed from Havana. It's a pitiful remnant. The living are a catalogue of injuries, broken bones, deep lacerations, and a pervasive, soul-deep exhaustion. You take a grim accounting. The highest-ranking officer besides yourself seems to be a young lieutenant from the Marine contingent. He helps you organize the able-bodied men into search parties. The search is a grim task. The surf continues to deposit the dead onto the shore. You see the bodies of men you had spoken to just days before, their faces pale and bloated. You find one of the priests, his black robes tangled around him, half buried in the sand. He looks strangely peaceful. But there are also signs of the wealth that caused all this. Gold and silver coins are scattered across the beach like seashells. One of the survivors finds a solid gold plate washed up in the seaweed, likely from the personal effects of a wealthy passenger. A fringe, almost morbid tidbit of survivor accounts from shipwrecks of this era is that some bodies were found with their pockets weighed down by gold, the very wealth they were trying to save having pulled them under the waves and drowned them. For now, the treasure is meaningless. It cannot be eaten. It cannot cannot provide warmth or shelter. Your first priority is survival. The immediate threat is no longer the sea, but the land. You are marooned on what appears to be a desolate, uninhabited barrier island. Behind the beach is a dense, unfamiliar jungle of saw palmettos, sea grapes and mangrove thickets. You need water, food, and fire. The lieutenant, proving his worth, organizes a party to search for a source of fresh water, digging into the sand behind the first dunes. Others are sent to salvage what they can from the wreckage. They come back with sodden barrels of salted meat, a few casks of wine, and, most importantly, some flint and steel scavenged from a soldier's pouch. By nightfall, the gale has lessened slightly. The survivors huddle around a sputtering fire, built from driftwood. The flames cast flickering shadows on their drawn, haunted faces. The air is filled with the sounds of coughing and quiet weeping. For all your authority as Captain General, you can offer them little comfort. You are as much a castaway as the lowliest cabin boy. You stare into the fire, the images of the storm replaying in your mind. The shrieking wind, the collapsing masts, the ghost ship you saw disappearing into the waves. Remember the obnoxious little dog that belonged to the passenger. You find yourself wondering if it survived, a strangely mundane and absurd thought in the midst of such profound tragedy. The following days are a blur of grim routine. You and the survivors establish a crude camp. Using torn sails as tents, you create a semblance of shelter. More bodies wash ashore and are buried in shallow graves above the high tide line, their resting places marked with simple wooden crosses made from splintered planks. The work of salvaging continues. Men wade into the treacherous surf to pry chests loose from the wrecked hulls. Some of these contain treasure, which you have piled up under guard, a strange mound of wealth on a desert island. Other chests, more precious now, contain ship's biscuit and tools. There is a scholarly debate about the immediate fate of the scattered survivors. While your group managed to consolidate, others were likely shipwrecked further up and down the coast, some possibly falling prey to exposure, starvation, or perhaps even hostile encounters with the local Ais people, a native tribe known for their fierce defense of their territory. For now, your concern is only for those you can see. You are a leader again, but of a wretched, shipwrecked kingdom. A week after the storm, you decide that you cannot simply wait to be discovered. The Spanish authorities in St. Augustine, far to the north, must be alerted. It's your only hope for rescue. You select your best sailing master and a small crew of the fittest sailors. They set to work, cannibalizing a half-destroyed ship's longboat, patching its hull and stepping a small makeshift mast. It's a flimsy-looking craft, hardly seaworthy, but it is all you have. You give the sailing master his instructions. He is to sail north, staying close to the coast, and pray he reaches the Spanish garrison. You hand him a letter you have painstakingly written on a scrap of sailcloth with a piece of charcoal, a report to the governor detailing the loss of the fleet. As you watch the small boat being launched into the surf, bobbing precariously on the waves, you feel a renewed sense of helplessness. You have sent your best men off in a desperate gamble. Now all you can do is wait and hold your starving, dispirited community together on this thin strip of sand, surrounded on one side by a hostile sea and on the other by an unknown and possibly hostile land. The treasure is a silent, glittering accusation, a reminder of the monumental failure that will forever be attached to your name. Weeks bleed into one another at the grim encampment you have named Campamento de la Cúpula, or Dome Camp, after the nearby geographic feature. Life settles into a monotonous rhythm of survival, dictated by the tides and the dwindling supplies. The initial shock has given way to a gnawing, weary dread. Every sunrise reveals the same scene: the hostile ocean, the debris-strewn beach, and the impenetrable green wall of the Florida wilderness. Morale is a fragile commodity, one you struggle daily to maintain. You enforce a strict discipline, knowing that idleness would lead to despair and dissent. Men are kept busy with drills, guard duty over the salvaged treasure, and endless back-breaking salvage work. At low tide, teams wade out to the nearest wrecks, working with saws and axes to cut into the hulls and retrieve anything of value. They bring back not just chests of coins, but also barrels of flour now turned into a pasty, half-rotten goop, lengths of rope and canvas. The camp's cook, a wiry man from Seville, performs miracles with what little he has, boiling the salvaged meat and flour with local sea grapes to create a barely palatable stew that keeps you all alive. Despite the routine, tensions simmer. There are whispers and dark looks. Men who sailed together as comrades now eye each other with suspicion. Fights break out over small things: a ration of wine, a drier spot to sleep. You have to be judge and jury, dispensing justice swiftly and fairly to prevent the camp from fracturing. A soldier caught trying to hoard salvaged silver coins is flogged in front of the assembled survivors, a brutal but necessary reminder that you are still under military law, still servants of the Spanish crown, even here at the edge of the world. The hoard of recovered treasure grows into a glittering mountain of failure. Chests of silver pesos, bars of gold, and even delicate pieces of jewelry rescued from the surf are piled in a central tent, guarded day and night. The sight of it is a constant painful irony. You possess a fortune that could buy a dozen palaces, yet you cannot purchase a single loaf of fresh bread or a cup of clean water. It is just heavy, yellow metal and stamped silver discs, utterly useless for your immediate needs. You reflect on the folly of it all. Remember how King Philip V needed this treasure to save his kingdom. It seems the kingdom's saviour is now just sand-crusted ballast on a god-forsaken beach. One morning, a scout returns with startling news. They have made contact, not with the Spanish from St. Augustine, but with the Ayes, the native people of this coast. The initial encounters are tense. The Ayes are tall, powerful people, their skin bronzed by the sun, their hair worn long. They appear at the edge of the jungle, armed with longbows, watching your camp with unreadable expressions. A priest who speaks a few words of a related dialect goes out to meet them. After a nervous negotiation, a cautious truce is established. This encounter marks a strange and noteworthy moment in history. A large-scale, prolonged interaction between Europeans and a tribe that, until then, had fiercely resisted Spanish influence. They bring food, smoked fish, hearts of palm, strange roots, which they trade for salvaged metal tools and trinkets. Their help is the difference between starvation and survival, a fact that is not lost on you. You, the Captain General of the Spanish treasure fleet, are now dependent on the charity of a people your empire would likely have tried to conquer. Weeks after your small boat departed, you see it, a sail on the northern horizon. Hope, a feeling you had almost forgotten, surges through the camp. It is not your longboat returning, but a larger vessel, a salvage sloop flying the Spanish flag. Your message got through. Your men succeeded. The arrival of the salvage masters from St. Augustine, and eventually from Havana, transforms the camp. Suddenly, you are no longer a castaway, but an official once more overseeing a massive state-sponsored salvage operation. But with the return of order comes the return of bureaucracy. A junior official, freshly arrived from Cuba, begins to ask questions, taking depositions, making notes. His eyes are cold and assessing. You are no longer just a survivor. You are the captain who lost the fleet. The first whispers of blame begin to circulate, carried on the very ships that came to rescue you. You are eventually relieved of your command on the beach and ordered to return to Havana to give your official testimony. The voyage back is surreal. You travel on a crowded sloop, a passenger on a vessel far smaller than even the humblest ship in your lost fleet. As you sail away, you look back at the Florida coast, the site of so much suffering. It looks peaceful, almost beautiful, in the afternoon sun, belying the ghosts and treasure it still holds. In Havana, the atmosphere is thick with accusation. The loss is too great, the treasure too valuable for someone not to be held responsible. You face a board of inquiry. Day after day, you sit in a hot, airless room, recounting the final days of the fleet. You describe the strange calm, the lurid sunset, the unnatural swells. You speak of the storm's fury, the sound of the ship breaking on the reef. You do your best to explain that no man could have sailed against such a force of nature, but you see the skepticism in their eyes. They are looking for a scapegoat, not an explanation. Historians still debate the true extent of Ubila's personal culpability. Was he negligent for sailing so late in the season? Absolutely. Was he directly ordered to do so by a desperate king, leaving him with no real choice? Also, yes. His case became a classic study in the unforgiving politics of a vast and unwieldy empire. He was trapped between the king's command and the ocean's wrath. In the end, you are formally charged with negligence and dereliction of duty. Though you are never imprisoned, you are ruined. Your name, once respected in the Spanish Navy, is now synonymous with the single greatest maritime disaster in the history of the Spanish Empire. Your career is over. You are stripped of your rank and titles, left with nothing but the crushing weight of your failure. You are, for all intents and purposes, erased from the institution to which you dedicated your life. You live out the remainder of your days in obscurity, a ghost haunted by the memory of a shrieking wind and a fleet of phantom ships. You survived the hurricane, a feat in itself, but you did not survive the aftermath. In the end, it wasn't the storm that destroyed you. It was the king's wrath and the slow, grinding machinery of blame. Your horrifying ordeal did not end when you washed ashore. That, you realize, was only the beginning. Education in the Aztec Empire, settle in now. Let the day's noise recede and find a comfortable stillness in your mind. We are going to drift back together across the quiet sea of time to a place that feels both strangely familiar and wonderfully remote. Let your awareness settle in the Valley of Mexico, around the year 1500. The air here is thin and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and 1,000 blossoming flowers. You are a child, and in the great, humming city of Tenochtitlan, the island capital of the Aztec Empire, your future is not an open question. It is a path. And that path, for everyone, begins with school. Imagine you are very small, perhaps only 4 or 5 years old. You live with your family in a simple adobe house, its walls cool against the midday sun. Your home might be one of several clustered around a shared patio, a communal space filled with the sounds of life. The rhythmic slap, slap, slap of your mother, or an aunt patting maize dough into tortillas. the gentle cooing of turkeys in a wooden pen, the distant thrum of market day chatter drifting over the water from the Tlatelolco Square. Your world is one of canals instead of roads, and the quiet splash of a canoe paddle is the most common sound of transit. Brightly painted boats glide past your doorway laden with brilliant chilies, iridescent feathers and shimmering obsidian. It's a city built on a lake, a wonder of engineering and sheer will, and it is the only world you have ever known. From your earliest moments, you are taught your place, your purpose. It is not done with harshness, but with a deep, unshakable sense of order. When you were born, the midwife who delivered you would have washed you and given you a series of formal, solemn speeches. She would have dedicated you to the gods of your parents' trade. If you are a boy, she might have placed into your tiny, grasping hands a miniature shield and bow, a symbolic hint, a prophecy of your future. Here is your life, the gesture says. You will be a warrior, a defender of this great city. If you are a girl, your first toys would have been a miniature spindle and a tiny weaving baton. Here is your life, they say. You will be the heart of the home, a creator of priceless textiles, a keeper of the hearth. There's no pressure, really, just the casual, crushing weight of destiny handed to you along with your first rattle. Your days are filled with small duties. You are taught to be helpful, to be respectful, to speak in a quiet and considered tone. Your father might take you to the Chinampas, the famous floating gardens that feed the metropolis, and teach you how to gently pull weeds from the dark, rich soil. You learn the names of the plants, the moods of the water, the way the sun warms the back of your neck. Your mother might teach you to sweep the packed earth floor of your home, a task seen not as a chore, but as a sacred duty to keep chaos at bay. These are your first lessons, learned not in a classroom, but through the gentle rhythm of daily life. But you know, even at this young age, that this is not the end of your education. You hear the older children talk. You see them marching in groups through the neighborhood in the morning, their faces serious. They are heading to school. In your world, this is a given. It is an unshakable, universal truth. Every child goes to school. This simple fact is, to an outsider, utterly astonishing. At this very same moment in history across the Atlantic in Europe, education is a rare privilege, reserved for a handful of wealthy nobles and aspiring monks. Most children there will live and die without ever learning to read a single word. But not here. Here, in the heart of this powerful empire, education is compulsory. It is your duty and your destiny. Your society is built on a foundation of shared responsibility, and that begins with shared knowledge. The state has decreed that every single child, boy or girl, noble or commoner, must receive a formal education. This isn't just about reading and writing, though that is part of it for some. It is about creating a citizen. It is about weaving you into the vast, intricate fabric of the empire. You must learn the history of your people, the songs that praise the gods, the skills needed to serve the state, and the discipline required to be a productive member of society. They are, in essence, building an empire from the classroom up, and you are a living, breathing brick in that grand design. Historians still argue whether this system was born from a genuinely enlightened belief in civic education, or from a more pragmatic and perhaps cynical need for social control. Was it to truly empower every citizen, or was it the most efficient way to churn out soldiers, farmers, and taxpayers who all knew their place and obeyed without question? The answer is likely somewhere in between. A society that values order as much as yours does would see no contradiction between personal development and state service. The two are one and the same. You know that soon, perhaps around age 12 or 15, it will be your turn. Your parents will take you to one of the two types of schools. Which one you attend is decided by your birth. Most children, the sons and daughters of farmers, artisans and merchants, the common folk, the Maseholtin, will go to a local school, right in your own neighborhood, your Kalpuli. This school is called the Telpochkali, the House of Youth. It has a reputation for being boisterous, practical and tough, a place where you learn to be strong. But there is another kind of school. If you were born into the nobility, the Pili, or if your parents have dedicated you to the priesthood from a young age, you will attend a different institution. This one is called the Kalmakak, the House of Tears. Even the name sounds forbidding, whispered with a mixture of reverence and fear. The Kalmakak is a place of austerity, penance, and elite learning. It is where the future priests, judges, generals, and government officials are forged in a crucible of cold, hunger, and relentless study. It's essentially a very exclusive, very uncomfortable boarding school where the primary extracurricular activity is ritual bloodletting. So as you drift off to sleep, curled on a reed mat in your quiet adobe home, you might wonder about these two paths. You might hear the distant sound of chanting from the local temple pyramid, a low and steady drone that is the heartbeat of your city. You listen to the gentle lapping of the canal water against the foundations of your house. Your future is coming. Will it be the dusty, sweat-soaked training ground of the House of Youth, or the cold stone halls of the House of Tears? For now, you are safe in the warmth of your home. For now, you are just a child. But soon, very soon, your real education is about to begin. And so the day arrives. You are a little older now, the world of your earliest childhood receding into a warm memory. Your parents lead you not to the great temple precinct at the center of the city, but to a long, low building in your own neighborhood. It is the Telpochkali, the House of Youth. There is no grand stone entryway carved with serpents or jaguars. It is a sturdy, practical place, bustling with the energy of boys and girls your age and older. The air smells of dust, sweat, and the faint, lingering scent of copal incense from the small shrine in its courtyard. This is to be your world now. Your home is still where you will sleep, but this is where you will be forged. You are handed over to the masters of the youth, the Telposhtlatok. These are not priests or scholars. They are veteran warriors, men who have seen battle, who bear the scars of it on their arms and faces. They are stern, weathered, and not given to sentimentality. Their job is not to nurture you, but to toughen you. There are no gold stars for participation here. There is only duty, discipline, and the hard-won respect of your peers. Your first tasks are humble, designed to sand the soft edges off your childhood. You sweep the patios. You collect firewood from the forests on the mainland. A long and tiring journey on foot. The group of you, a gaggle of new recruits, learns to work together to carry heavy loads without complaint. These expeditions are your first taste of real hardship. Your hands, once soft, begin to callous. Your back, once accustomed only to a reed mat, learns the dull ache of labor. In the evenings, you do not go straight home. You and the other students work on public projects for the Kalpuli. You might be tasked with dredging a local canal, your legs deep in the cool mud, or repairing the stucco on a small neighborhood temple. It's a clever system, really. You're not just learning, you're also the city's free-of-charge public works department. But the core of your education, as a boy, is war. It is the reason the Empire thrives, the engine of its expansion. The training begins not with weapons, but with your own body. You run, you wrestle. You are deliberately underfed to learn endurance and made to take ice-cold baths to learn fortitude. One of the more invigorating, welcome rituals for new boys involves being roused from sleep and dunked in a freezing pond. It certainly wakes you up faster than a cup of hot cocoa. This is all part of the process, a systematic breaking down of the individual in order to rebuild you as part of a unit. The boys you struggle against in wrestling drills are the same boys whose lives you will be expected to protect on the battlefield. You are learning to be a team. Eventually, you are introduced to the tools of your future trade. You learn to handle the quilted cotton armor, soaked in salt water and dried to become surprisingly resilient. You practice with the spear thrower, the atlatl, a deceptively simple-looking stick that can launch a dart with astonishing force and accuracy. And then you are taught to wield the signature weapon of the Aztec warrior, the macuahuitl. It is not a sword. It is something else entirely. Or imagine a thick, flat wooden paddle like a cricket bat, with razor-sharp shards of obsidian, volcanic glass, embedded along its edges. It is a weapon designed not for clean kills, but for maiming and stunning. This brings you to the central crucial lesson of Aztec warfare, a truth that defines your entire military education. Your primary goal on the battlefield is not to kill your enemy. Your goal is to capture him. A dead warrior on the field is a waste. A living, captured warrior is a precious offering to the gods, a testament to your own skill and courage. His sacrifice will feed the sun, ensuring that it rises again tomorrow. And so you are not trained to lunge and thrust for a vital organ. You are trained to break a leg, to slash a limb, to disable and subdue. You practice in mock battles, learning how to swarm an opponent with your squad mates, how to pin him down, and how to drag him, still living, from the fray. Your first capture will be your moment of glory, the event that marks you as a true warrior, earning you the right to finally cut your hair in the distinctive style of a veteran. Now, if you are a girl, your time at the Telpochcali is different. While the historical accounts, written largely by Spanish friars after the conquest, are incredibly detailed about the boys' military training, they are frustratingly vague about the girls' curriculum. The chroniclers, bless their pious hearts, were not exactly focused on the intricacies of girls' education. While we know they attended, the exact nature of their studies remains a topic of considerable discussion among historians. They certainly weren't training with obsidian-studded war clubs. Instead, your education centers on your public and religious duties. You learn hundreds of songs. You memorize epic poems that recount the history of your people, the great migration from the mythical homeland of Aztlan, the founding of Tenochtitlan. You are taught the complex religious dances, movements that are not mere performance, but a form of prayer in motion. Your role is vital for the countless festivals that mark the Aztec calendar, when the city comes together to celebrate a victory or honor a god. It is you and your classmates who will provide the beautiful sacred chorus of song and dance that rises from the plazas. You learn to weave and embroider with stunning skill, not just for the home, but for the creation of priestly vestments and the decorated cloaks of great warriors. Your contributions are not on the battlefield, but they are absolutely essential to the cultural and religious life that underpins the entire empire. Life in the House of Youth is loud, demanding, and communal. There is little privacy and even less coddling. You are tired, you are often hungry, but you are never alone. You are bound by a shared experience to every other commoner child in your neighborhood. You are becoming part of something larger than yourself, a gear in the magnificent humming machine of the state. As you finally return to your own home late at night, your muscles aching, your mind full of new songs or the weight of a practice shield, you might look across the dark water towards the great central pyramids. You might see the flicker of torchlight high up in the temple district and know that a different kind of education is happening there, in the silent, imposing halls of the Kalmakak. Now, let us imagine a different path. Rewind a little. You were not born to a family of artisans or farmers. Your cradle was lined with soft rabbit fur and fine cotton. Your father is a high-ranking judge, or perhaps a military general with a headdress of magnificent quetzal feathers. Your destiny was never the Telpochkali. You are one of the Pili, the nobility. And so, on the appointed day, your parents lead you with solemn ceremony to the very heart of the city, the great sacred precinct. Past the twin temples of Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli, you are brought to the door of the Kalmakak, the House of Tears, and it will live up to its name. Where the House of Youth was loud, this place is hushed. The walls are high, the courtyards swept clean, and the air is thick with the scent of dried blood and holy incense. There is no boisterous energy here, only a deep, intimidating silence. You are received by priests with downcast eyes and long matted hair, a physical sign of their devotion and status, as it was a sacred duty never to cut it. Their ears are torn from ritual self-sacrifice. They are terrifying. This is not school as you know it. This is a monastery, a boot camp for the soul. From the moment you enter, your life of comfort is over. Your soft clothes are replaced with a rough maguey fiber cloak, thin and useless against the cold mountain nights. Your bed is the hard stone floor. Your diet is meager and precisely portioned, a small bland tortilla a day, maybe a few beans. Deliberate deprivation is the first lesson. You are here to master your body, to prove that your spirit can command your flesh. When you shiver from the cold, that is a test. When your stomach growls with hunger, that is a test. The priests watch you constantly, silently, their expressions unreadable. Your days are a grueling cycle of labor, learning, and penance. Long before dawn, you are woken for an icy bath. Then you and the other students, boys and in separate quarters, girls destined for the highest ranks of the priestesshood, set to work. You collect wood for the sacred fires that must never be extinguished. You carry water. You sweep the temple causeways. But unlike the public works of the Telpochkali, this labor is sacred. You are not just cleaning a building. You are maintaining the sacred order of the cosmos. Every action is a prayer. And then there is the penance. This is the part that gives the school its name. Self-sacrifice is the core of your religion. The gods gave their own blood to create the world, and it is your duty to repay that debt. So, you learn to give yours. You are taught how to pierce your own earlobes with a sharpened bone or a maguey thorn, how to draw blood from your tongue or your arms in ritual offerings. This is not seen as self-harm in the modern sense. It is a sacred transaction, a way of feeding the divine. You carry your bundle of sharp implements with you, and at set times during the night, you will go alone into the darkness of the mountains or the woods to make your offering to the gods. There is a quirky, though certainly not amusing tidbit in one of the old codices suggesting that a student who fell asleep and missed a midnight offering could be punished by having his lips pricked until they bled, a rather direct form of negative reinforcement. Between the cold, the hunger, and the bleeding, you study, and the learning here is profound. Where the Telpochkali teaches you the what of your culture, the Kalmakak teaches you the why. You learn to read and write the complex system of pictographs and glyphs. You are not just memorizing stories, you are reading the sacred books themselves, the deerskin codices painted with the wisdom of generations. You study rhetoric and law, preparing you to become a judge or an ambassador, speaking in the formal, flowery language of the court, the tek pilatoli. You learn engineering and architecture so you can oversee the construction of aqueducts and pyramids. Your main subject, however, is cosmology. You must learn the secret language of the universe. Your teachers, the Tlamatinaim or wise ones, unspool for you the breathtakingly complex Aztec calendar. You learn about the Tonalpohualli, the 260-day ritual calendar that governs religious life, and the Xiuhpohualli, the 365-day solar calendar that governs the agricultural cycle. You learn how these two calendars mesh together in a 52-year cycle, at the end of which the world is in danger of ending. It's your job to know the correct rituals to ensure that doesn't happen. No pressure. You learn the sacred histories, the stories of the 5 suns, the successive worlds that the gods created and destroyed. You learn the intricate lineages of the gods themselves, the countless deities for rain, for maize, for war, for weavers, for the scribes who are your teachers. It is a pantheon so vast it makes the Greeks look disorganized, and you must know them all. You must know their stories, their feast days, and their specific sacrifices. Historians still argue whether the highest level education in the Kalmakak involved a more abstract, philosophical understanding of the divine, or if it was simply the rote memorization of this overwhelming number of deities and rituals. Was it deep theology, or the most demanding course in religious administration ever devised? As a boy, this education is grooming you for power. You will become a general, a high priest, a senator, maybe even the next emperor, the Hui Tlatoani. The boy you study next to, the one whose shivering you can hear in the dark, might one day command your armies or sentence you in court. As a noble girl at the Kalmakak, you are being prepared for an equally vital, if less public, role. You might become a high priestess serving in the temples, interpreting divine will and overseeing female religious orders. Or you might be destined for a strategic marriage to a noble from a newly conquered city-state, a living thread binding a new province to the imperial center. Your education in history, rhetoric, and courtly manners is just as critical as the boy's training in military strategy. Your path is one of immense privilege and immense suffering. You walk the same sacred ground as the emperor. You are learning the secrets that hold the universe together, but the cost is high. You live in a state of perpetual draining fatigue, your body aching and your mind overflowing with cosmic data. You see the Telpochkali boys from a distance sometimes, strong and boisterous, their lives seemingly so much simpler. And yet, you know your burden is also your honor. You are the mind of the empire, just as they are its arms. You are a child of the House of Tears, and the future of the world rests on your small, tired shoulders. The years have passed. The shivering child who first walked through the doors of the Telpochkali or the Kalmakak is gone. You are a young adult now, somewhere in your late teens or early 20s, and your formal schooling is at an end. Graduation is not marked by a cap and gown, but by a fundamental change in your status. You are ready to step into your assigned role, to become the person you were always meant to be. The grand, state-run educational experiment has concluded, and you are its product. If you emerged from the boisterous, practical world of the House of Youth, you are now a full member of your local Kalpuli. For you, a young man, the most glorious path is clear. You are a warrior. You have the calluses, the discipline, and the tactical knowledge. You will now join a military unit and go on your first real campaign. The mock battles with blunted weapons are over. Now you face the terrifying reality of the battlefield, the chaotic whirl of obsidian-edged clubs and the screams of the injured. All that training, the cold baths and the endless drills now has its ultimate test. Your performance here defines your future. Capturing a single enemy earns you respect and the right to wear a new cloak. Capturing 4 or 5 might elevate you to the prestigious ranks of the Jaguar or Eagle Warriors, granting you land and a higher social standing. You become a hero, a source of pride for your family and neighborhood. But what if warfare is not your strength or your destiny? Not everyone was cut out for the front lines, and your society understood this. The Telpochkali also prepared you to be a skilled artisan or a productive farmer. You slot back into your family's trade, but you are not the same person who left. You are disciplined, physically tough, and deeply integrated into your community. You understand your duties. You know the songs. You have worked on the city's canals and temples. You are, in short, a model citizen, a successful graduate, and perhaps most importantly for the state, you are a dutiful taxpayer. This is a subtle but mainstream historical fact, often lost in the focus on warriors and priests. The Aztec educational system was incredibly effective at producing a compliant and productive populace that reliably paid the immense tributes required to run the empire. If you are a young woman graduating from the Telpochkali, your moment of transition is marriage. Your training in song, dance, and religious duties makes you a desirable partner. You will be wed, likely to a young man from your own Kalpuli, in a complex ceremony that involves tying your cloak to his. You will become the heart of a new household, responsible for weaving, cooking, raising children, and managing the family economy. This was no small task. A good household manager was crucial for a family's success. Your education was not a path to a career in the modern sense, but a preparation for a different kind of essential role, one that the Aztecs held in very high esteem. You are a pillar of the community, the keeper of the hearth, the singer of the sacred songs at festivals. If, however, your path took you through the austere halls of the House of Tears, your future is vastly different. You, a graduate of the Kalmakak, stepped not onto the battlefield, but into the corridors of power. As a young man, you might be appointed as a scribe, your beautiful, precise calligraphy put to use recording tribute payments or historical events in the painted codices. You might become a priest, serving a specific god in a specific temple, your life now dedicated to interpreting celestial events and placating the divine. You might be assigned to a court as a junior judge or official, your knowledge of the law and rhetoric finally put to practical use. Your path is cerebral, not physical. The hardships you endured were not to toughen your body for war, but to sharpen your mind for rule. For a woman graduating from the Kalmakak, you might enter the priesthood permanently, achieving a high and respected rank within the temple complex. Or you might be a pawn in the high-stakes game of imperial politics. A marriage will be arranged for you, not with a neighborhood boy, but with a prince from a newly conquered territory. Your intelligence, poise, and deep understanding of Aztec ideology make you the perfect cultural ambassador. You will be sent to this foreign court to establish a new Aztec-aligned dynasty, ensuring the loyalty of a key province. Remember all those lessons on rhetoric and courtly manners? This is the final exam. And so you find your place. The two distinct educational streams, one for the masses and one for the elite, flow together to form the great river of the empire. Everyone has a purpose, a slot that has been prepared for them since birth. You look around the grand city of Tenochtitlan now, not as a child, but as a participant. You see the canoe-filled canals, the bustling Tlatelolco market, the immense pyramid at the city's heart, and you understand your own part in it all. The warrior sees it as a fortress to be defended. The weaver sees it as a community to be clothed. The priest sees it as a shrine to be maintained. Your education has given you more than skills. It has given you a world view. It has permanently colored the lens through which you see everything. It has taught you that the individual exists to serve the collective, that the cosmos is a hungry and precarious place requiring constant attention, and that order is the highest virtue. There's a certain peacefulness in this clarity, a lack of modern anxiety about finding yourself. You did not have to find yourself. You were built. From the first symbolic toy placed in your infant hands to the final test of your schooling, your identity has been meticulously constructed. As you settle into your new life, you will occasionally see the children, the new generation, marching to their duties from the house of youth, or you might glimpse the pale, serious face of a young noble in the temple precinct. And you will feel a sense of connection, a recognition of the path they are just beginning. Your journey is done. You are the empire. And now it is their turn to be forged. Let that thought rest in your mind. Let the sounds of the distant city, the water, the wind, the faint echo of a ceremonial drum fade into a gentle quiet. The lessons are over. Your work is done. It is time to rest. Fashion in Renaissance Italy. Let the weight of your day begin to lift. Gently close your eyes or let them rest softly on a point in the room. We are going to drift back on the quiet currents of imagination to a place of marble and sunlight, of vibrant color and whispered ambition. Let your mind settle in a bustling city-state in Italy, sometime in the late 15th century. It could be Florence, where the air hums with the new wealth of banking families, or perhaps Venice, with the salty tang of the lagoon and the scent of exotic spices just unloaded from a trading galley. The sounds are different here. There are no engines, only the melodic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the low murmur of conversation in Tuscan dialect, the rhythmic chip, chip, chip of a stonemason creating a new saint for a chapel wall. You are standing in a sun-drenched piazza, the heart of the city. Before you is a kaleidoscope of human life, and in this world, more than almost any other, you can read a person's entire story just by looking at them. Fashion here is not a trivial pursuit. It is a language. It is a weapon, a shield, a political treatise, and a balance sheet all stitched together and worn on your back. To be seen is to be judged, and every single person in this square, from the wealthiest banker to the humblest apprentice, is exquisitely aware of it. This is the art of bella figura, the beautiful figure, a concept that means so much more than just looking good. It's about presenting yourself to the world with grace, dignity, and an outward display that reflects your inner worth, or at least the inner worth you want people to think you have. Look at the man passing by. He is a merchant, and you know this without hearing him speak a single word. His cloak is made of fine Florentine wool, dyed a deep, rich scarlet. That colour alone costs a fortune. It comes from the Kermes insect, a precious commodity that produces a crimson far more vibrant and lasting than cheaper dyes made from plants like madder. The cloak is lined with fur, not rabbit, you note, but something darker and richer, perhaps marten. He is making a statement. My business is thriving. My credit is good. I can afford to wrap myself in the price of a small farm. His success is not tucked away in a ledger. It is broadcast for all to see. Now a woman steps out of a palazzo, her lady's maid a few paces behind. Her gown. It is almost an architectural project. The fabric is a deep blue silk velvet, the colour shimmering as it catches the light. The cost of that velvet, woven with silk threads brought overland from the east, is astronomical. Her sleeves alone are a marvel, puffed and slashed to reveal a different cloth of gold fabric underneath. Each slash, each puff, each pleat is a calculated expense. This is not just a dress. It is an advertisement for her family's power. A well-dressed wife and daughters were one of the primary ways a family could project its wealth and social standing, a core tenet of Renaissance society. The father or husband paid for it all, turning his female relatives into beautiful walking billboards for his own success. It's a bit less romantic when you think of it that way, isn't it? The original influencers, but the sponcon was a bit more legally binding. This explosion of opulent fashion was fueled by the immense wealth flooding into Italy, the banking empires of families like the Medici in Florence, and the trade monopolies of Venice and Genoa, created a new class of fantastically rich citizens who were not ancient nobility. They were entrepreneurs, and they used clothing to compete with the old aristocracy, proving that their new money could buy just as much, if not more, velvet, silk and gold thread than old blood. Historians still argue whether this frantic sartorial competition was a symptom of social insecurity, a joyful expression of newfound prosperity, or a calculated political tool. Was that merchant in the scarlet cloak trying to blend in with the nobles, or was he subtly challenging them, stating that his merit and money were as good as their lineage? The answer is likely all three at once. Even the way people carried themselves was part of the performance. There was a celebrated concept among the Italian elite known as sprezzatura. The writer Baldassare Castiglione defined it as a certain nonchalance, so as to conceal all art and make whatever one does or says appear to be without effort, and almost without any thought about it. It was the art of making the incredibly difficult look easy. So, you didn't just wear your breathtakingly expensive outfit. You had to wear it as if you just threw it on. You had to make the meticulously constructed layers, the restrictive undergarments, and the sheer weight of all that fabric seem as comfortable and natural as your own skin. It was the ultimate power move. Being so wealthy, you could afford to seem casual about it. You noticed the little details everywhere. The cut of a man's doublet, the angle of his cap, the length of a woman's train, these are all signals. The laws of the city even tried, and mostly failed, to regulate it all. They dictated who could wear what, but we'll get to that tangled mess of rules later. For now, you just absorb the spectacle. A group of young men, likely apprentices, swagger by in brightly coloured hose, their cheap wool a stark contrast to the merchant's velvet. A lawyer is identifiable by his long, dark, sober robes. A foreign visitor from Germany or Spain stands out immediately, their clothing built on a completely different silhouette, looking rigid and strange to your Florentine eyes. The world here is a stage, and the costumes are everything. They signify your family, your city, your profession, and your ambitions. To be poorly dressed, or dressed in a way that didn't match your station, was to be invisible, or worse, to be an object of ridicule. As you stand in this sunlit square surrounded by the rustle of silk and the soft scuff of leather shoes on stone, you understand. You are not just looking at clothes. You are reading the intricate, beautiful, and deeply competitive soul of the Renaissance. And soon we will begin to unpick the threads of these magnificent outfits, layer by layer. Your gaze now settles on one of these young men, a figure of effortless elegance, radiating the confidence that only generational wealth can truly buy. He is perhaps 20 years old, leaning against the base of a marble fountain, chatting with friends. Let's mentally undress him in the most scholarly and respectful way, of course, to understand the complex layers of his attire. The foundation of everything, for every man from a duke to a ditch digger, is the camisa, the shirt. His would be of the finest snow-white linen, imported from the Low Countries. It feels cool and smooth against the skin. For a poorer man, this shirt would be of rougher linen or even hemp, but the basic form is the same, a simple T-shaped tunic. The quality of your camisa is a subtle but crucial sign of class. While it's an undergarment, it is deliberately made visible. You can see the fine, pleated edge of it peeking out at his collar, and again at his wrists where the sleeves of his outer garment end. Having a clean, white camisa to show off was the single most important indicator of personal hygiene and status. Laundry was a difficult, laborious process, so a pristine collar said, "I own so many shirts and employ so many servants to wash them that I can be this immaculate every single day." Over the shirt he wears the primary male garment of the era, the doublet or farsetto. This is a short, close-fitting jacket designed to sculpt the upper body. It nips in at the waist and is padded in the chest and shoulders to create a strong, masculine silhouette. It's a look that says, "I have excellent posture," mostly because slouching is a physical impossibility. His doublet is made of a deep blue silk velvet that seems to drink the sunlight. The garment is fastened down the front with a long row of intricate buttons, each one a tiny work of art in itself, perhaps made of silver or wound with gold thread. But the real engineering of the outfit lies in how the lower half is attached. You'll notice he is not wearing trousers or pants in any modern sense. Instead, he wears hose or calzi. For much of the 15th century, these were two separate form-fitting leggings, covering each leg from the foot to the hip. They were tied directly to the inside of the doublet with a series of laces called points. These were long ribbons, often tipped with metal aglets, threaded through reinforced eyelets on the hose and the hem of the jacket. This is a simple, fundamental fact of Renaissance dress. Men were quite literally tied into their clothes every morning. The quality and colour of a man's hose were paramount, as they showed off the shape of his legs, a feature greatly admired at the time. His are a vibrant crimson, the expensive Kermes dye we saw earlier, a bold contrast to his blue velvet doublet. It was the 15th century equivalent of driving a bright red sports car, a blatant and highly fashionable bid for attention. Of course, with two separate leggings, there is an obvious gap in the middle. This was covered by a triangular flap of fabric called a codpiece, or braguetta. What began as a simple, modest flap of cloth for decency's sake slowly morphed, over the decades, into one of the most curious and unsubtle fashion statements in European history. By this period, it has become padded, decorated, and increasingly prominent. Historians still argue whether the ostentatious codpiece was a symbol of potent masculinity, a declaration of virility in an age of uncertain succession, or simply a convenient padded pocket in an outfit that otherwise lacked them. The truth is likely a bit of each. It was, after all, a handy place to keep a coin purse or a handkerchief. Over his doublet and hose he wears a sweeping overgarment called a jornier. It is sleeveless, open at the sides, and falls to his mid-thigh in stiff, elegant pleats. It is made of a heavy wool brocade, woven with gold threads that catch the sun. This outer layer is pure theatre. It adds gravitas to his figure and allows him to show off yet another fantastically expensive fabric. As he gestures in conversation, you see that the velvet of his doublet sleeves has been slashed. A series of small, precise cuts made in the outer fabric to reveal the delicate white linen of his camisa puffing through from underneath. This is a wonderfully strange and luxurious practice. You spend a fortune on a bolt of Italian velvet, only to take a knife to it. This peculiar trend of slashing and pinking, according to a popular tale, may have started with Swiss mercenary soldiers, who supposedly patched their tattered uniforms with scraps of rich fabrics looted after a battle. The resulting ragged, multicolored look was then, allegedly, picked up by civilians and transformed into a highly refined and deliberate fashion statement. He completes his look with a few carefully chosen accessories. On his head is a soft felt cap worn at a jaunty angle. His shoes, or scarpe, are made of soft, thin leather without a noticeable heel, accentuating the elegant line of his leg. Tucked into his belt might be a beautifully crafted dagger, as much a piece of jewelry as it is a weapon, and a silk pouch for his money. Every element is a choice. Every choice is a message. The deep blue of his doublet signifies his family's allegiance in the city's complex political landscape. The quality of the fur lining his jornier speaks of connections to northern trade routes. He is a walking, breathing testament to his lineage, his wealth, and his place in this glittering, competitive world. Now, let your attention drift from the peacocking gentleman by the fountain to a lady of equivalent status. She might be crossing the piazza on her way to Mass, or perhaps seated on a cushioned balcony, an idealized figure from a Titian painting brought to life. The first thing you notice is not a single garment, but her silhouette. Where the man's clothing emphasizes a strong V shape and athletic legs, hers is all about a cylindrical torso, a high waist, and a cascade of fabric that glides over the ground. It is an image of pure, untouchable elegance, and it is achieved with even more engineering than the man's outfit. Like the man, her wardrobe begins with a camisa, but a wealthy woman's camisa could be a work of art in itself. Made from the very finest linen, it would be exquisitely embroidered at the collar, and cuffs with delicate patterns in black or red silk thread, a style known as blackwork in England. This embroidery was a subtle but clear sign of refinement and was meant to be seen, framing her face and hands with its intricate beauty. Some of the most delicate embroidery was done in convents, where nuns were renowned for their incredible skill with a needle, their sacred work repurposed for secular vanity. Over her camisa, she wears her gown, the gamura or cotta. This is the foundational dress. In the late 15th century, it is typically high-waisted, fitting smoothly over the torso and then falling in a full, heavy skirt to the floor. There are no corsets here in the later Victorian sense. The stiff, sculpted torso shape is achieved through the careful cut and structure of the dress itself, which is often interlined with canvas to give it body. A more formal version of this dress is the cioppa, often with a long, dignified train that might require a servant to carry. Imagine the rustle of all that heavy silk or velvet moving across the stone flags of the church. The sleeves are, once again, the star of the show. While the bodice of a gown was often straightforward, The sleeves were detachable and could be mixed and matched between different dresses. A wealthy woman would own several pairs of sleeves in different fabrics and styles, allowing her to change the look of an outfit dramatically. Like the men's doublets, her sleeves might be tied on with points, the laces threaded through eyelets at the armhole. This explains a curious detail in many Renaissance portraits where you can see little gaps at the shoulder, with the white camisa puffing through. It's not a wardrobe malfunction, it's a deliberate and very chic design feature. Her sleeves might be made of a different, more lavish fabric than the dress itself, perhaps a gold brocade paired with a crimson velvet gown. The visual impact is one of layered, almost unbelievable opulence. Over the Gemara, for outdoor wear or on formal occasions, she might don a majestic overgown called a jornia, similar to the man's garment but longer and even more voluminous. It would be sleeveless to show off the magnificent sleeves of the gown beneath, and often lined with fur, a display of pure luxury. You see this garment in countless portraits, framing the figure of the sitter in a bold swathe of colour and texture. It is a status symbol so potent, it's basically a wearable bank account. But the clothing is only half the story. The look is completed by her face and hair. The ideal of beauty during this time was a high, smooth forehead, pale, luminous skin, and fair golden hair. And ladies went to extreme lengths to achieve it. To get that coveted high forehead, some women would actually pluck or shave their hairlines back an inch or more. It sounds strange to us, but it created a sense of swan-like elegance that was highly prized. To lighten their hair, women would sit for hours on their balconies wearing a special wide-brimmed, crownless hat called a solana. They would spread their hair over the brim, exposing it to the sun, after having coated it in a concoction of Venetian-made bleaches, often containing ingredients like rock alum, black sulfur and honey. This was a long, tedious process, and it broadcast to the whole neighborhood that you had hours of leisure time to literally sit and watch your hair bleach. And for her complexion, the desire for ghostly pale skin was paramount. Tanned skin was for peasants who worked in the fields. A noble lady protected her skin with powders, veils, and a popular, though terrifying, foundation called Venetian ceruse. This was a paste made of white lead and vinegar. It gave the skin a beautiful, smooth, pearly finish. Unfortunately, lead is a deadly poison. It was slowly absorbed through the skin, leading to hair loss, tooth decay, paralysis, and eventually, death. It's a rather macabre fringe tidbit of history that the quest for ideal beauty could be, quite literally, fatal. The more you used it to cover the blemishes, the more blemishes the lead created, locking women into a toxic cycle of cosmetic use. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen from our talks of ancient Rome? Venetian ceruse gives it a real run for its money in the terrible historical skincare category. Finally, her hair is not left loose, but meticulously styled. It might be braided with ribbons and strands of pearls, then looped and pinned into intricate shapes at the back of her head, sometimes held in place by a delicate jewel-studded net called a tranquil. A fine, almost transparent silk veil might be draped over the finished creation, softening the lines and adding a final touch of modest, yet expensive grace. From the lead on her face to the pearls in her hair, from the embroidered camisa to the fur-lined giornia, she is a masterpiece of artifice. Her entire being has been molded, styled and presented to reflect the power and taste of her family. She is a living work of art. Now, as you observe these magnificent figures, you might begin to wonder if there were any rules. Could anyone with enough florins just throw on a fur-lined velvet gown and declare themselves part of the elite? The answer is a definitive and slightly amusing no. City governments across Italy were engaged in a constant and mostly losing battle against an enemy they themselves had created: fashion. They did this through a series of regulations known as sumptuary laws. These laws were, on the surface, meant to curb excessive spending and reinforce moral fibre. The official reasoning, often preached from the pulpit by fiery priests like Girolamo Savonarola in Florence, was that extravagant dress led to vanity, debt, and the general decay of a good Christian soul. But their real purpose was social control. Sumptuary laws were designed to be a firewall, preserving the visible distinctions between social classes. They were a legal attempt to stop that wealthy merchant from dressing like a duke, or to prevent a craftsman's wife from wearing the same pearls as a banker's daughter. It was an effort to make the social hierarchy legible at a single glance. The laws were incredibly, almost comically, specific. One Florentine law from the 1450s dictated the maximum number of silver buttons a person could wear. A law in Venice might limit the length of a woman's train or ban the use of certain types of fur, like ermine, for anyone outside the highest echelons of the nobility. There were rules on how much embroidery was permissible on a camisa, and restrictions on certain colours of dye. The most expensive dyes, scarlet, certain purples, and rich, deep blacks, were often reserved for specific offices or social ranks. These were, in effect, government-mandated colour palettes for your life. Imagine getting a fine for wearing the wrong shade of red. It puts modern dress codes into perspective. To enforce these laws, cities employed special magistrates. You can picture them, stern-faced officials roaming the piazzas and church doorways with a critical eye, essentially the first fashion police. They had the authority to issue fines on the spot or even confiscate offending garments. The historical record is full of citizens being cited for violations. A sleeve deemed too voluminous, a jewel considered too large, a fabric too luxurious for the wearer's station. This led to a kind of cat-and-mouse game between the fashionable and the authorities. People would devise clever ways to get around the laws. One well-known trick was to own a pair of plain, law-abiding outer sleeves that could be quickly slipped over your fabulous, illicitly decorated ones if you saw the magistrate coming. But the enforcement was inconsistent at best. A wealthy banker fined for his wife's opulent dress might be the very same man the city government was hoping to secure a massive loan from the next week. Ultimately, new money always found a way. The laws were revised, ignored, and rewritten constantly, but they could never truly stem the tide of competitive dressing. This constant struggle is a key fact of the era. For all its artistic glory, Renaissance society was deeply anxious about social mobility, and clothing was the primary battlefield where that anxiety was played out. As the years tick by, a few trends from this period leave a lasting legacy. The detached sleeve, born of economy and style, evolves into different forms but influences clothing for centuries. The emphasis on fine linen undergarments creates a new standard for European hygiene and dress. The doublet, the ancestor of the modern waistcoat, gradually gets longer, and the hose evolve into breeches, laying the groundwork for the male silhouette that will dominate for the next 200 years. Even the notorious codpiece has a surprisingly long run before it finally, mercifully, recedes into history in the later 16th century. What we truly inherit from this era, though, is not a specific garment but an idea that what we wear is a powerful form of communication. The Renaissance Italians may not have invented this concept, but they elevated it to an art form. The modern pressure to own designer labels, the power suit of the 1980s, the use of fashion by celebrities to craft a public persona, it all has a distant echo in a sun-drenched Florentine piazza. That desire to express status, ambition, and identity through cloth is a direct thread connecting our world to theirs. It's a bit less dramatic for us. No one is at risk of death by lead-based foundation anymore, though some modern beauty trends give it a go. So, as our time in Renaissance Italy comes to a close, let the scene gently fade. Let the vibrant colours soften and the murmur of the crowd drift away. You've walked through a world where a sleeve was a statement and a collar was a manifesto. You've seen how layers of silk and velvet could build an identity, and how governments tried and failed to control the irrepressible human desire to be seen. You can let go of the heavy brocade and the intricate laces now. Let your own comfortable clothes feel light and simple. The stage is dark. The piazza is quiet. The performance is over, and you can just rest. Espionage in the Elizabethan era. Let the sounds of your world fade into a soft, indistinct murmur. Allow your breathing to slow, your shoulders to release their hold. We are going to drift back, not to a place of sunlit marble or high desert, but to a city of damp cobblestones and shadowed alleys. We are going to find ourselves in London, near the end of the 16th century. The air in this Elizabethan realm is thick with the scent of wood smoke, coal fires, and the damp, earthy smell of the ever-present River Thames. The sky overhead is often a gentle, pearlescent grey, and a fine mist seems to cling to the half-timbered buildings. This is not a kingdom at ease. This is a realm of whispers. You are here, a silent observer, in a nation holding its breath. England is ruled by a queen, Elizabeth, who is both revered and deeply vulnerable. She is a Protestant monarch in a Europe dominated by Catholic powers who view her as a heretic and a usurper. Her own cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, a Catholic with a potent claim to the English throne, is living under house arrest within her borders, a magnet for every disgruntled Catholic lord and foreign agent in the country. To make matters worse, Elizabeth is unmarried and childless. The entire nation is locked in a decades-long, low-grade panic about the succession. It's as if an entire country is asking its monarch the same nagging question your relatives ask at family gatherings. So, any prospects? This background hum of anxiety became a piercing alarm in 1570. In a move of immense political significance, the Pope issued a declaration, a papal bull known as Regnans in Excelsis. This was no mere theological document. It officially declared Elizabeth excommunicated, illegitimate, and stripped of her right to rule. More than that, it absolved all her Catholic subjects from any allegiance to her and, in no uncertain terms, encouraged them to remove her from power. This is a crucial, mainstream fact of the era. The Pope essentially put a spiritual bounty on the Queen's head. Overnight, every devout Catholic in England was placed in an impossible position, forced to choose between their faith and their Queen. And for the state, every Catholic was now a potential traitor. And so, the paranoia takes root and blossoms. It permeates every level of society. A casual conversation in a crowded tavern falls silent when a stranger enters. A Latin phrase spoken between two scholars could be a coded message. A letter from a cousin in France might be from a plotter in exile. There are no private messages here, no encrypted chats. Every letter sent abroad is liable to be opened, read, and scrutinized by unseen eyes. You learn to be careful with your words, to master the art of saying nothing of consequence. Beautifully, This is a world where danger feels ambient, like the persistent damp, and at the very center of this nervous kingdom, there is a man whose job it is to worry. He is the Queen's principal secretary, her spy master. We can imagine him in his chambers at court, a soberly dressed figure in a world of gaudy ruffs and satin. He is not a swashbuckling adventurer. He is a bureaucrat of suspicion, a puritanical patriot who believes with every fiber of his being that the forces of darkness are gathering to destroy his queen and his country. His desk is a sea of paper, reports from agents in Paris, Rome and Madrid, intercepted letters from country manors, transcripts of interrogations from the Tower of London. He is the nerve center of the realm's defense, and his weapon is information. His network is vast, but it is not a formal, state-funded agency like MI6 or the CIA. It is a more private, almost artisanal enterprise, funded by his own wealth and run on his personal authority. He sees threats everywhere because threats are everywhere. The history of Elizabeth's reign is a steady drumbeat of foiled plots and conspiracies, from the Ridolfi plot to the Throckmorton plot. He does not believe in coincidence. He does not believe in innocence. He believes in vigilance. Historians still argue whether this pervasive atmosphere of suspicion was a necessary response to a very real and existential threat, or if the government, to some degree, weaponized this fear. Did they use the handful of genuine plots to justify a wider campaign of suppression against English Catholics, consolidating the state's power by creating a permanent, internal enemy? Was the danger as immense as the spy master believed? Or did his own paranoid worldview lead him to build a machine that sometimes created the very conspiracies it was designed to uncover? The truth, as always, likely lies in that murky space between reality and perception. This was an age where the lines were blurry. A fascinating, if quirky, aspect of the era was the state's intense interest in astrology and prophecy. A cunning man or astrologer who cast a horoscope predicting when the Queen might die, a common enough practice at the time, could find himself arrested for treason. The act of predicting the monarch's death was seen as perilously close to imagining or even encouraging it. So even the stars were considered a potential source of sedition, their movements tracked by the spy master's agents as carefully as the movements of Spanish ships. As the London evening draws in, a lamplighter moves along the street, leaving pools of soft, flickering light in his wake. The shadows lengthen and deepen. In one of those shadows, a man might be watching a doorway. In a quiet room, a clerk might be carefully unsealing a letter with a warm knife. From the top of St. Paul's, the city looks like a collection of secrets. You can feel the quiet, meticulous work humming just beneath the surface of daily life. The realm of whispers is awake and listening, and we are about to meet the man who pulls the strings. The man at the center of this web of whispers is Sir Francis Walsingham. Let's draw a little closer to him, into the quiet confines of his study. You can almost feel the chill in the air, a dampness that even a large, crackling fire in the hearth can't quite banish. The room is panelled in dark wood, and the overwhelming scent is of beeswax, old paper and ink. There are no grand portraits on the walls, no frivolous decorations. This is a workshop, not a drawing room, and Walsingham himself, bent over a letter at his desk, seems to match his surroundings perfectly. He wears sober black velvet, no flamboyant colours, no unnecessary lace. The only hint of vanity is a small, neat ruff at his neck, immaculately white against the darkness of his doublet. He is not a large man, but he possesses an unnerving stillness. His gaze is intense, his expression perpetually serious. Walsingham was a devout, devout, uncompromising Protestant, a Puritan. This is the mainspring of his character, the engine of his actions. He doesn't just see the Catholic threat as a political problem, he sees it as a profound, spiritual evil. He is engaged in a holy war, and his battlefield is this desk, covered in letters and reports. For him, rooting out Catholic plotters is not just a job, it is a sacred duty, not a man who enjoyed a surprise party. He is methodical, meticulous. Every scrap of information is noted, cross-referenced and filed away in his prodigious memory, and his even more prodigious collection of documents. He trusts no one fully, not even his own agents. He operates on the principle of verification, always seeking a second or third source to confirm a piece of intelligence before acting upon it. His great web, which extends across England and deep into the courts of Europe, is not a cohesive unit of trained professionals. It is a messy, sprawling network of individuals, all managed by the man at the centre. Who are these people, the threads in Walsingham's web? They are a strange and varied collection of souls. Many are what you might call gentlemen spies, younger sons of good families, men with a university education in Latin and Greek, but with no land to inherit and few prospects. Walsingham would send them to the continent, to the English seminaries in Reims or Rome, where priests were being trained to return to England as missionaries. These young men would pose as devout converts, eager to join the Catholic cause, all the while sending back detailed reports on who was there, what was being taught, and who was funding it all. Then you have the more established agents, men stationed permanently in foreign capitals like Paris or Madrid. These were the ambassadors' men, who supplemented official diplomacy with the dirty work of bribery, theft and surveillance, building networks of local informants in the Spanish court, or among the retinues of French dukes. Perhaps the most fascinating and morally ambiguous of his agents were the Catholic double agents. Walsingham was a master at turning a captured priest or plotter. A man might be arrested, taken to the tower, shown the rack in a very persuasive, non-verbal argument, and then given a choice: cooperate or face the grim consequences of treason. Many chose to cooperate. They would be released and would continue their work in the Catholic underground, but now they would report every detail back to their handler. Historians still debate whether these men acted primarily out of self-preservation, a genuine change of heart, or if some managed the impossibly dangerous feat of playing both sides. It was a life of constant, terrifying tension. And then there were the intelligencers, the freelance informants from the London underworld. These were the forgers, the con men, the disgruntled sailors who'd heard gossip in a foreign port, the tavern keepers who overheard conversations. They were unreliable, often motivated by nothing more than the promise of a few shillings, but they were Walsingham's eyes and ears on the ground. He would sift through their mountain of rumour and hearsay, looking for the one valuable nugget of truth. It was like having a very analogue, very grim social media feed that he had to personally curate every single day. One of Walsingham's most curious recruits, a perfect example of his unconventional network, was a brilliant young student at Cambridge, a poet and a playwright known for his sharp mind and even sharper temper. His name was Christopher Marlowe. It's a quirky, almost romantic, fringe tidbit of history that this great literary figure was very likely a government spy. He had long, unexplained absences from his university, and when the authorities there threatened to withhold his degree due to suspicions he intended to go abroad to a Catholic seminary, the Queen's own Privy Council intervened. They sent a letter stating that Marlowe had been engaged in matters touching the benefit of his country and should not be penalised. It seems that paying off your student loans by engaging in a bit of light international espionage was a viable, if risky, career path. You can imagine a man like Marlowe, brilliant, restless and cynical, thriving in this world of secrets. It was a place where his quick wit and ability to assume a different character were not just useful, they were tools of the trade. And so Walsingham built his network from these disparate parts: idealistic patriots, terrified prisoners, penniless scholars, and street-level crooks, all of them feeding information back to the quiet man in the dark room, the spider at the center of it all, who would sit and patiently weave their tangled reports into a single coherent picture of the threats facing his queen. Let's now turn our attention from the people to the methods they used. How did this sprawling, informal network actually function? How did you, a lone agent in a hostile city, get your message back to Walsingham? And how did Walsingham, in his London study, separate the vital intelligence from the noise? This was the subtle craft of Elizabethan espionage, a world of chemistry, linguistics, and human psychology, all practiced by candlelight. The most basic challenge was communication itself. The postal service was to be charitable, unreliable. Letters were carried by slow-moving messengers on horseback, vulnerable to weather, bandits, and interception by rival agents. Any letter sent abroad was considered public property by the state. You had to assume that every word you wrote would be read by an official at some point. Therefore, a straightforward, incriminating message was out of the question. You had to learn the art of concealment. The first and most common method was the use of invisible ink. This sounds like something out of a children's detective story, but it was a serious and widely used tool. A simple and popular recipe, known since ancient times, involved using the juice of an orange or a lemon. You would write your sensitive information between the lines of a perfectly ordinary, mind-numbingly dull business letter. To the casual observer, it was a merchant's note about the price of wool. But Walsingham, receiving the letter in London, would know to gently heat the parchment over a candle flame. As the paper warmed, the acidic juice would oxidize and darken, and the secret words would ghost into view, a faint, brownish script appearing between the lines of black ink. A simple trick, but effective. Of course, more sophisticated chemical compounds were also developed, requiring a specific agent to be washed over the page to reveal the text, a bit like developing a photograph. But invisible ink wasn't foolproof. If your letter was intercepted by a savvy counter-espionage agent, and the Spanish had some very good ones, they knew to heat the letters too. For truly sensitive material, you needed a cipher. Ciphers were the backbone of secure communication, and Walsingham's chief codebreaker, a man named Thomas Phillips, was a genius at both creating and breaking them. A mainstream historical fact of the era is the widespread use of so-called nomenclator ciphers. This wasn't a simple substitution where A always equals B. That was child's play, easily broken. A nomenclator was a far more complex system. It combined a substitution alphabet with a codebook of symbols that stood for entire words or common names. Imagine a letter arriving on Felipe's desk. It looks like complete gibberish, a jumble of Greek letters, zodiac signs, numbers, and abstract symbols. First, he would consult his key, the master document that matched each symbol to a letter. But some symbols wouldn't be letters. The symbol for Jupiter might stand for the word and. A triangle might mean the Queen. A little drawing of a crown could stand for Mary, Queen of Scots. There would also be nulls, meaningless symbols thrown in just to confuse anyone trying to crack the code. It was painstaking work. Felipe's would sit for hours, meticulously substituting each symbol, slowly teasing a coherent message from the cryptographic soup. The skill involved was immense, requiring not just a knowledge of the key, but a deep understanding of language patterns, a familiarity with the sender's style, and a great deal of intuition. Then there was the delicate art of interception itself. How did Walsingham get these letters in the first place? His agents were everywhere. They monitored the ports, paying dock workers to report any suspicious passengers. His postmaster, one of the more chillingly sterile job titles, oversaw the interception of diplomatic pouches and private mail. A messenger might be waylaid on the road, his pouch lost, only to be returned to him a day later, its contents having been carefully opened, copied, and resealed. Walsingham's team included an expert forger and seal maker, a man whose entire job was to replicate the intricate wax seals on letters so perfectly that the recipient would never know their correspondence had been compromised. A tiny, almost imperceptible detail in the eagle's wing on a family crest had to be flawless. Beyond the technical skills of ink and ciphers, there was the human element. The most valuable information often came not from letters but from people. This required the fine art of interrogation. And here, the methods ranged from subtle persuasion to outright brutality. The Tower of London was the ultimate interrogation centre. Its very name was a threat. When a key suspect was captured, he would be subjected to a slow, grinding psychological pressure. He would be questioned for hours, left in solitary confinement, and then questioned again. A fringe tidbit about the Tower's operations is the carefully calculated use of food as a tool. A prisoner's rations would be changed based on their level of cooperation. One day a man might get a decent meal of bread, meat and ale. If he was uncooperative the next, he might receive only stale bread and foul water. It was a small but deeply demoralizing tactic designed to break the spirit. And if psychological pressure didn't work, there was always the rack. But Walsingham and his chief interrogator, the aptly named Richard Topcliffe, were sophisticated practitioners. The threat of torture was often more effective than the application. Merely showing a man the rack was often enough to persuade him to talk. Historians still argue whether Walsingham was a ruthless pragmatist using the grim tools of his time to protect the state, or a cruel fanatic who took pleasure in the relentless pursuit of his enemies. The truth of his personal feelings is lost to us, buried under the mountain of official documents he left behind. His methods were brutal, but in his mind, the stakes, the life of his queen and the survival of his religion, justified them completely. Now let's watch all these elements, the agents, the ciphers, the informants, converge in the quiet finale of a real conspiracy. The year is 1586, and for years Mary, Queen of Scots, has been under lock and key, a living symbol of the Catholic threat. Walsingham has always believed she is a plotter, but he needs proof. He needs irrefutable evidence that she is not just a passive figurehead, but an active participant in a plot against Elizabeth. He needs to catch her, quill in hand. The plot that will ultimately seal her fate is known to history as the Babington Plot. It's a classic of the genre, hatched by a group of idealistic, reckless young Catholic gentlemen led by a man named Anthony Babington. Their plan is dramatic and foolishly optimistic. Assassinate Queen Elizabeth, free Mary, and place her on the throne with the help of a Spanish invasion. It's a fantasy born of frustration and religious zeal. What they don't know is that from its very inception, Walsingham's network has its threads woven throughout their conspiracy. The linchpin of the whole operation is a man named Gilbert Gifford, a handsome, charming young man from a Catholic family. Gifford is the perfect double agent. He presents himself to Mary's supporters as a loyal courier, a brave soul willing to risk his life to smuggle letters in and out of her prison at Chartley Hall. And he is, in a way. He devises a clever system. Letters for Mary are hidden inside a watertight tube, which is then placed in the hollowed-out bung of a beer barrel. A local brewer, who is secretly in on the scheme, then delivers a weekly barrel of beer to Chartley. Mary's servants retrieve the message and use the same route to send her replies out. It seems like a perfect, foolproof system. Here is where Walsingham's meticulous planning comes to fruition. That helpful brewer? He is one of Walsingham's men. Every single letter that goes into that beer bung and every single letter that comes out makes a little detour. Before it reaches Mary or her supporters, the brewer passes it to Thomas Phillips, the master codebreaker, who has been conveniently moved to a house nearby. This is the crucial element of the trap, a mainstream fact of the Babington plot that showcases Walsingham's genius for stage management. Philippes unseals the letter, copies it, and deciphers the coded message. If needed, the forger, Arthur Gregory, creates a perfect replica of the seal, and the letter is then sent on its way, with neither the sender nor the recipient any wiser. For months, Walsingham reads every word of the plotters' correspondence. He doesn't just listen, he controls their entire channel of communication. He patiently waits. He needs more than just evidence of a plot. He needs Mary to personally and explicitly consent to the assassination of Elizabeth. Finally, the letter he has been waiting for arrives. It is from Babington, laying out the entire plan in detail, including the dispatch of the usurper. Now, all Walsingham needs is Mary's reply. The suspense in Walsingham's London office must have been palpable. The trap is set, the bait taken. All they need is for the target to step into the snare. The coded letter from Mary comes back through the beer barrel route. Philippes gets to work. As he deciphers it, he finds the fateful lines. Mary accepts the plan. She encourages the plotters. Crucially, she adds a phrase asking them to first ensure that her own escape is secure before they carry out the assassination. This is her death warrant. She has personally endorsed regicide. Philippes, in a moment of grim scholarly triumph, cannot resist adding a small drawing on the copy he makes. A little gallows. A fringe tidbit, a secret symbol from one spy to another, signifying, "We've got her." There is, however, one final scholarly debate that lingers around this crucial letter. Some historians argue that Walsingham's team might have added a postscript to the decoded copy of Mary's letter, a part that specifically asked the plotters to name all their co-conspirators. The original letter has never been found, so it's impossible to know for sure if this was a final, brilliant act of forgery to get the names of every last plotter, or if Mary wrote it herself. Either way, the net closes. With Mary's damning letter in his hands, Walsingham strikes. Babington and his fellow conspirators are rounded up, interrogated, using all the methods we've discussed, and executed. And then, Mary herself is put on trial. The evidence is overwhelming. The decoded letters, the copies of her own replies, the testimony of her own secretaries. It's an open and shut case. She's found guilty of treason and, after much soul-searching by Elizabeth, she's executed in 1587. The world of whispers has done its work. A queen is dead, a dynasty is secured, and a rival monarch is safe for now. Walsingham's great, sprawling web of spies, with all its moral compromises and dark methods, has achieved its ultimate goal. It has eliminated the single greatest threat to Elizabeth's throne. As you reflect on this quiet, shadowy world, let the tension recede. The plot has been foiled, the letters have been read, the secrets are all out. The meticulous, nerve-wracking work is done. Walsingham's network saved a queen, but it also cemented a new kind of statecraft, one built on surveillance, information control, and the cold, hard logic of national security. A logic that has, in its own way, echoed down the centuries. The candlelight in the spy master's office has burned out. The realm of whispers can finally fall silent. And you can find your own peace in the quiet of your room.